Haplogroup E is Semitic, and Haplogroup J is not Semitic. But before we get too deep into the video, first I want to tell you guys about my social media platforms. So I have a Clubhouse account, and we can actually talk to one another on it. I also host Clubhouse rooms every now and then where I might talk about history and genetics of the Middle East and Africa. I have a Twitter page, a Facebook account, and a Facebook page, as well as a Instagram, all titled The Hebrew of Israel. And what I typically do on these platforms is post upcoming videos as well as slides for my presentations. And so just be on the lookout for all of that on my social media platforms. And if you want to support me financially for the channel, you can look at my Patreon as well as my PayPal and my GoFundMe. And with all of that out of the way, let's begin with the video. Haplogroup E is seen as Proto-Semitic. Basically, people with Haplogroup E would have been the first Semitic speakers. Haplogroup E is Semitic in origin. This is from How Eurasia Was Born, and it says the most plausible candidates for Semitic remigration to the Fertile Crescent with TMRCAs fitting the arrival of the Akkadians and other early Semitic peoples are certain subclades of both E-V22 and E-V12, with respectively early TMRCAs present in the Middle East could be candidates for such remigration, such as E-FGC14382, TMRCA is 2200 BCE, and E-V3262, TMRCA is 2600 BCE. This is from Peter Solomonkovas, and he says, my theory is that when the Proto-Semitic language left the Afro-Asiatic homeland of Northeast Africa, not just one lineage left, but a group of Proto-Semitic people from this region that included all the Y DNA haplogroups then present in Northeast Africa. It is possible that Northwest Semitic Hebrew people and languages dispersed into the Levant from Northeast Africa's Nile region around 5000 BCE. Thus, the earliest out-of-Africa settlement of Proto-Semitic people was likely in Yemen on the southeastern region of the Arabian Peninsula. They then spread to the east and northeast to enter Mesopotamia and found the Semitic kingdom of Akkad and the Akkadian Empire. In this group, many of us conclude that Haplogroup E is one of the major founding haplogroups of the Semitic people, and that Haplogroup E people were the ones who brought Proto-Semitic language out of the Afro-Asiatic homeland in Northeast Africa into the Levant and Mesopotamia. And this is Haplogroup E1B1B by DNA by EUpedia, and they say E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of E1B1B, and is thought to have arrived with the Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age. Haplogroup E is definitely Semitic in origin compared to Haplogroup J. Now, am I saying that Haplogroup J isn't Semitic? Yes. Haplogroup J is definitely not Semitic in origin. But I will say that you do have people with Haplogroup J that are Semitic speakers, but Haplogroup J is not Semitic in origin. Haplogroup E is Semitic in origin. With that being said, how and why are people with Haplogroup J speaking a Afro-Asiatic Semitic language? The answer is simple. Their ancient ancestors adopted the Semitic language from Proto-Semites that had Haplogroup E. Now, it's not a theory of mine or me just saying this. Multiple researchers in the field have already said this many times. This is from Haplogroup J1 by DNA from EUpedia, and it says, looking at the map of J1-P58, it is easy to assume that P58 is a marker of Arabic ancestry because it reaches its maximum frequency in and around the Arabian Peninsula. That would be an oversimplification. It is important to make a clear distinction between people who speak Arabic and those who are genetically Arabic. These are two completely different things. For comparison, people who speak languages descended from Latin, such as French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Romanian, are not necessarily descendants of the ancient Romans of Latium. Even those who do may not have more than a tiny fraction of their genome which was inherited from actual Roman ancestors. This is why most Romance language speakers today cannot be considered as genetically Roman. Most present-day Arabic speakers outside the Arabian Peninsula are likewise only very partially or not at all Arabic genetically. In the northern half of the Middle East, most of the people who call themselves Arabs of today are in fact mainly descendants of other historic peoples, such as the Phoenicians, Assyrians, Babylonians, or even the Hurrians. Most of these people are predominantly J2, with many minor haplogroups like E1B1B, G, J1, L, Q, R1A, R1B, and T. The other subclades of J1 cannot be considered to be the paternal descendants of the first speakers of Arabic. These other J1 lineages were Arabicized alongside other haplogroups like J2 and Q1b, etc. Likewise, J1-P58, E-M34, it is also shared with their Semitic cousins, the Jews. Haplogroup E1B1B is considered the primary candidate for the origin and dispersal of Afro-Asiatic languages across northern and eastern Africa and Southwest Asia. The Semitic languages appear to have originated within the subclade of E-M34 branch of E1B1B. And this paper is Haplogroup J1 is definitely not Semitic in origin. This is from haplogroups.org, and it says Haplogroup J1 is not a Semitic haplogroup in origin. However, genetically, we cannot call this haplogroup Semitic because Semitic people mainly have the FGC11 lineage of this haplogroup in those areas. As Arabic society is mainly based on a unique cluster of J1 haplogroup FGC11, it is wrong to call all people with J1 as Semitic. In this case, we cannot attribute haplogroup J1 to Semitic origin. In fact, it is apparent that there are various clusters of J1 among Caucasian, European, and South/Central Asian people, especially in the Caucasus. The Caucasus. J1 seems in high or medium amounts among various ethnic groups, and just going to name some of the ethnic groups, such as Chechens and Avars and the Saracens and other groups like that. All these peoples speak various languages which are bound up with Northeast Caucasian languages, Northwest Caucasian languages, and Turkic languages. And European people having J1 also speak Indo-European languages rather than Semitic languages. So blue bar means J1-FGC11, which is a unique lineage among Arabs. On the other hand, the other lineages would seem among Europeans, Caucasians, and Turks rather than Arabs. This means J1 haplogroup isn't of Semitic origin. So I'm just going to show you a closer image. So what you see here in blue basically the Middle East. This is the FGC11 uh, branch of Haplogroup J, and it's only one particular branch, only seen in the Middle East. But you see a variety of various J branches all throughout the Caucasus and Europe. Here are all the other J branches, all the other subclades of J that you find in parts of Europe and around. So it's very intriguing that you only really see one particular type of J in the Middle East, but you see a more diverse group of J in Europe. So it is also known that the mostly seen haplogroups in Afroasiatic speakers is the lineages of E1b, such as V12, V32, and M81. E1b is one of the most common haplogroups in Semitic people in the Levant and Mesopotamia. In the meantime, E-V12 seems to be a part of Nile Basin and Arabia, and E-M81 is related to Northwest Africa. Based on Arab genealogical tradition, the Adenites are Arab-derived Arabs, whereas Quatanite tribes are thought to be pure Arabs, which we talked about in the past, the local people of Arabia. Today, in genetic projects, we see that most of people from Quatani tribes are usually related to the lineages of E1B1, which I talked about in my Joktan video. Check it out. Whereas Adenites are mostly related to J1, haplogroup J1. The main source for Afroasiatic languages are the lineages of E1B1, such as M2, V12, V32, U174, V22, etc., which spread the Levant during the early period of ancient Egypt and later towards Mesopotamia in the east. Semitic languages such as Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic are characterized under the Afroasiatic language family. This means that Arabic and Hebrew languages derive from the same language with Berber, Chadic, Cushitic, Egyptian, Amharic, Omotic languages of the Afroasiatic language family in North Africa. Today we see that the most of Afroasiatic people are E1B1b haplogroup, especially the lineages of V12, V32, and M81. And we see a great variety of E1b lineages among both Semitic and Afroasiatic people, whereas only FGC11 lineage of J1 is present among Afroasiatic Semitic people. And it is also impossible to see J1 haplogroup among several Afroasiatic people such as Berbers. According to the theory, Afroasiatic languages spread to Asia via E1b haplogroup, not J1 haplogroup. It is historically known that a ruling elite class of Afroasiatic people, Akkadians and Assyrians, etc., also invaded the north of Mesopotamia and brought their Afroasiatic languages to the central and northern parts of Mesopotamia during the period of Akkadians and Babylonians. Elite dominance model of E1B1B1 might be supposed for Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. In this case, since it might be theorized that Sumerian was the main language of the ancient Mesopotamians before Afroasiatic E1b overwhelmed Mesopotamia, elite dominance model. And so here's a paper, How Eurasia Was Born, and it says certain distribution patterns suggest that this eastward expansion of the Indo-European family occurred through northern Mesopotamia, south of the Armenian highlands, for long populated by speakers of Alduin languages and ancient Indo-European lineages, presumably populating northern Mesopotamia, before the Akkadian conquest. Lineages suggesting migrations to have occurred from Anatolia to northern Mesopotamia include subclades of J2A-M47, J2B-Y22075, J2B-Z43946, and J1-FGC6064, suggesting an Indo-European population in eastern Syria and northern Mesopotamia before the Semitic expansion. So J being associated with Indo-Europeans. This paper, Genetics, Egypt, and History, Interpreting Geographical Patterns of Y Chromosome Variation, and it says, it can be postulated that select M35 carriers, speakers from Africa of a stage of ancestral Semitic, pre-Proto-Semitic, entered the Near East. Now here's the important thing to hear in blue. Where indigenous peoples adopted it, and via ongoing language shift and population growth, eventually became innumerably greater than the original speakers of the ancestor. So originally, early Semites had Haplogroup E, then other people adopted it, and they became more numerous. This is from In Hot Pursuit of Language and Prehistory, and it says, the presence of Semitic in the Near East might be explained as follows. Early pre-Proto-Semitic speakers would have migrated into Syrio-Palestine before the Neolithic, being taken by their M35 bearers, specifically M35/M78, and adopted by populations bearing M89 lineages. So again, Haplogroup E speaking Semitic, and other people adopting the language. So what's M89, by the way? So M89 is also known as Haplogroup F, or FM89, and it represents 90% of the paternal lineages outside of Africa. So here's just a map showing you Haplogroup F. So the vast majority of individual males with F-M89 fall into its distinct descendants, Haplogroup GHIJK. Haplogroup GHIJK branches subsequently into two distinct descendants, G and HIJK. HIJK in turn splits into H and IJK. The descendants of the haplogroup IJK include the clades I, J, K, and ultimately several major haplogroups descend from K, namely haplogroups M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, L, and T. And of course, we have haplogroup IJ, is a human Y chromosome DNA haplogroup, an intermediate descendant of haplogroup IJK, as I just said, formerly known as F-L15. The intermediate descendants of IJK are haplogroup I and haplogroup J. Its sole sibling is K, which includes most of the world's male population. So when that paper was talking about how these M89 lineages adopted Semitic, this would include the haplogroup J marker because it's a M89 lineage. So as we can see, haplogroup E is definitely Semitic in origin, and haplogroup J is not Semitic in origin. Rather, it adopted the Semitic language. The only lineage that's actually really seen as Semitic from all the other sub-lineages of haplogroup J is J-P58. The other branches of J aren't seen as Semitic or Afro-Asiatic in origin. This also includes all of the rest of haplogroup J other than, of course, JP58. This is from haplogroup J1, YDNA from Eupedia, and it says J1-P58 is by far the most widespread subclade of J1. It is a typically Semitic haplogroup, making up most of the population of the Arabian Peninsula, where it accounts for approximately 40% to 75% of male lineages. So here is P58, and like I said, it's the one that's typically seen as quote unquote Semitic. But remember, this is only one subclade out of all the rest of haplogroup J1. Only one is seen as Semitic. Everything else is seen as non-Semitic. Like it's seen as European and Anatolian and Caucasus and stuff like that. It's typically seen as non-Semitic speakers. And again, even if you were to look at J2, remember, P58 is only one branch of the entire haplogroup of J, because of course we got to keep in mind that there's a J1 and a J2, and of course J2 is seen in Iran and Eastern Mediterranean and India and Europe and places like that, seen in ancient European populations like the Minoan Greeks, and other parts of Europe and the Caucasus and places like that. And here is just more of Haplogroup J seen in Neolithic Iran and other parts of the world. So again, with P58 only being the Semitic branch of J, really again makes it very unlikely for J to be Semitic, because it's only one tiny subclade out of a bunch of other subclades that's seen as Semitic. Doesn't really make sense. As we can see, the only branch of the entire haplogroup J tree that's seen as Semitic speaking is mainly J-P58. All other branches of haplogroup J either have a few Semitic speakers, while most are overwhelmingly European or Caucasian, basically non-Semitic speakers. Now, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen actually has a very interesting model. He also doesn't see haplogroup J as Semitic in origin, and he even says that haplogroup E was higher in the Middle East in ancient times than it is today. Basically, haplogroup E was pushed out of the Middle East by J markers. He actually says this. I believe this is something interesting for you guys to see. Even when it comes to creationists, they have a very similar model, no different than people who are non-creationists, like from all the sources that I read about E being Semitic and J adopting Semitic. So here's the video right here. Before I play the clip, I want to make it known that I am protected under fair use. I'm using this video for teaching purposes as well as research purposes. I am protected under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. Again, this is a copyright disclaimer. I am protected under fair use. I'm using this video for teaching and research purposes.
600 to 800s, when Muhammad and his band of Arab Muslims begin expansion, it may be this E1B1B lineage that does the expanding. I find this intriguing, eerie correlation between the geographic extent of the Muhammad Empire and his descendants and the distribution of E1B1B. Another reason why is when I was initially getting into linguistics, when I saw the distribution of Afro-Asiatic languages, North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, I thought, that's the Muslim conquest. That has to be it. How else can you explain the distribution of these languages? And here you see a genetic lineage that is very strongly correlated with it. The only exception is it isn't dominant now in the Middle East, but I think there's a reason for that. Fast forward a few centuries to the thousands, we talk about the arrival of the Turks from Central Asia. They go marching through the Middle East. I think this is how you begin to lose the dominance of E1B1B in the Middle East. Turks, of course, then get nearly extinguished by the Mongols. They survive, and so by the 1600s, they begin pushing north and south, north into Europe, south into the Arabian Peninsula. I think start kicking out some of the original Arab Muslims. Turkish Muslims take over. Let's zoom out a little bit further so we can see the rest of the world and how this history plays out. At some point, while this history is going on, E1B1A begins its expansion in sub-Saharan Africa. So much so that by the time the transatlantic slave trade begins, these are the peoples they're enslaving and bringing to the New World. And that sequence of events, I think, explains the distribution of these lineages that we see today. It raises new questions. I think it explains, basically what I'm saying is I think this is originally an African lineage that gets into Arabia, expands this direction, that direction, and then gets replaced by Turkish peoples who don't quite get as dominant in these directions. New questions. Yes, these people share a common ancestor. Who were they? What did they look like? So let me back up for a sec. I'm saying these might actually be Arab Muslims who have African origins, originally, 500 BC. So at some point there's dark-skinned peoples, but you look at Arabs today, they don't look like sub-Saharan Africans. At some point I think there was a dark-skinned ancestor because, again, one of these lineages becomes all these dark-skinned peoples. This is where we bring in ancient Egypt. These people have a common ancestor, then they split in 500 BC. This, I'm saying, looks like it probably became the Arab Muslims who then went conquering and remained the dominant lineage in North Africa, but got replaced by Turkish people in the Middle East. These people went on to dominate sub-Saharan Africa. Well, the geographic connection between this group and this group flows right through here.
The main takeaway from the video is that non-Semitic Haplogroup J groups pushed Haplogroup E out of the Middle East into Africa. His model is a bit different, but it's similar enough, and I find it, to be very interesting. Main takeaway is that Haplogroup E are Proto-Semites, ancestral Semites. They were the first Semitic speakers. Basically, they are Semitic in origin. But Haplogroup J is not Semitic in origin. Only one lineage, only one branch of Haplogroup J migrated into the Middle East, and that lineage adopted the Semitic language from Haplogroup E. Therefore, I would say, yes, you do have branches of Haplogroup J that speak Semitic languages, but they are not the originators of the Semitic language. That title belongs to Haplogroup E. But with that being said, this is where we end. Haplogroup E is Semitic and Haplogroup J is not Semitic. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, click the bell, and share the video. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and follow my social media platforms that I mentioned at the beginning of the video to contact me and to know when new videos come out. And with all of that out of the way, have a great day and shalom.